Sure. Here's an expanded and more engaging version of your introduction in the same style. Friends, if you want to watch the classic and thought-provoking movie Good Night and Good Luck from 2005 in English, then you must like this video. And if you are visiting our channel for the very first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because here we bring you exciting updates, complete details, and fun facts about your favorite movies. Friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is Good Night and Good Luck. This is not just any movie. This is a bold, historical, and very powerful film that left a deep impact on its audience when it was released. In this video, we will talk in detail about what this movie is all about, what makes it so special, and where you can watch it today. Whether it is available on any OTT platform, or which satellite channel is currently streaming this film, I will give you complete information. You won't have to search anywhere else after watching this video. We will also talk about the amazing technical team behind this film. Friends, we will discuss the brilliant direction, the unique cinematography, and the special black and white presentation that gives this movie a timeless feel. We will talk about the music department, how the background score perfectly fits the mood of the story, and how the soundtrack adds depth to every scene. Along with this, we will dive into the pre-production process, the planning of the movie, how the filming was done, how the post-production work brought everything together, and what was the budget of this film. I will also share with you whether this movie was a box office success, and how it was received by the audience and critics. Apart from this, I will tell you the story of the film in an easy and entertaining way. Friends, I will also give you a small review of the storyline, and tell you why this movie is so highly respected, even today. We will also discuss some interesting and lesser-known facts about this film that will make you appreciate it even more. In addition to all this, we will take a look at the star cast of the film. Who played which character? How were their performances? Which actor made the story come alive with their acting skills? We will talk about everything. Friends, I request you to watch this video till the very end, because the complete information about Good Night and Good Luck is waiting for you, and I don't want you to miss any detail. So friends, let's not waste any more time. Let's start the video. Sure. Here's a much more detailed and entertaining expansion of the plot and narrative section in the style you asked for. Alright friends, get ready, because the story of Good Night and Good Luck is like stepping into a time machine that drops you right into the smoky, black and white world of 1950s American television. But wait, this isn't just a backdrop for some random drama. No, this is a real battlefield where the weapons are microphones, cameras, and the truth. Right from the very first scene, you know you're not watching a typical film. There are no car chases, no explosions, no dramatic music trying to push your emotions in one direction. The story just calmly walks into your living room, sits down, lights a cigarette, and dares you to pay attention. We start in the buzzing CBS newsroom, where legendary journalist Edward R. Murrow and his team are getting ready to tackle something most people at the time wouldn't even whisper about. You can almost feel the nervous energy as producers shuffle papers, journalists argue over angles, and everyone knows that what they're about to do could change their lives forever. The story moves forward like a steady drumbeat, no flashy tricks, no fancy time jumps, no confusing flashbacks. It's a straight road, but oh what a road it is. The big enemy? Senator Joseph McCarthy. A man whose name was enough to send shivers down people's spines. He was at the center of the Red Scare, accusing anyone and everyone of being communists, creating a storm of fear where people could lose their jobs, their friends, even their freedom based on the flimsiest of suspicions. And here comes Murrow, not with protests, not with grand speeches on the streets, but with the most powerful weapon he had, a news broadcast. Can you imagine? A television show taking on the US government, right in front of millions of people. The story takes us through this careful, step-by-step process as Murrow and his producer Fred Friendly make the bold decision to investigate McCarthy's tactics. This isn't a decision made in a single heroic moment. No, they go back and forth, they argue, they worry about their jobs, they worry about their families. The film makes you feel the slow burn of that decision. It's not about being brave all of a sudden. It's about choosing to be brave over and over again, even when it starts to cost you everything. One of the first big moments in the story is when Murrow airs a report about an Air Force officer, Milo Radulovic, who is being dismissed from service because his father and sister are suspected of having communist ties. There's no real evidence, just fear and gossip. Murrow's team sees this as the perfect example of what McCarthy's campaign is doing to innocent people. They know airing this report is going to make waves, but they go ahead anyway. And just like that, they light the match. What's fascinating is that the movie doesn't create fake versions of McCarthy's speeches. It actually uses real footage from the time. You're not watching an actor pretending to be McCarthy. You're watching the actual man, with his real words, real accusations, and real power. That choice gives the film an electric feeling. It's not just a story anymore. It's history unfolding right in front of you. As the story moves forward, Murrow continues to poke holes in McCarthy's arguments, calmly and methodically, like a surgeon cutting through layers of lies. And the pressure? It keeps climbing. The CBS bosses are worried. Sponsors start pulling out. The team starts to feel isolated. There are moments where you can see the fear creeping into the room, where people start questioning if they've gone too far. Friends, this isn't just about making television. This is about survival in a time when questioning authority could destroy you. McCarthy finally strikes back by accusing Murrow of having communist sympathies himself. This is a big turning point. Murrow is no longer just reporting about other people. Now he's in the crosshairs. And what does Murrow do? He doesn't panic. He doesn't yell. He responds with another broadcast, calmly tearing apart McCarthy's accusations, using the senator's own words against him. It's like watching a master chess player trap his opponent in plain sight, one quiet, brilliant move at a time. One of the best parts about this narrative is that it never drifts. It never gives you filler scenes or unnecessary subplots. It stays laser-focused on this battle, the fight for truth in a sea of fear. And even though the structure is simple and moves in a straight line, it never feels slow. The tension is always there, humming under every word, every silent stare, every puff of smoke in the newsroom. The pacing is so tight, and the pressure keeps building because you know that at any moment, everything Murrow has worked for could come crashing down. The movie also doesn't spoon-feed you. It trusts you to keep up, to think, to feel the weight of what's happening. There are no dramatic musical cues telling you how to feel. Sometimes, the quiet is louder than words. The moments where people say nothing, they hit you the hardest. The looks exchanged between team members when sponsors pull out. The silent glances when government threats start to hover over their heads. Those are the moments that carry the most weight. Even the small side stories in the film, like the struggles of CBS anchor Don Hollenbeck, who faces his own battles with public pressure and personal doubts, all feed into this larger theme. The crushing power of fear and the lonely fight to stand up against it. Hollenbeck's story shows the emotional toll this battle takes on the people who dare to speak out. The film's rhythm, its clean, uncluttered narrative, and its steady forward march pull you right into this world where the cost of telling the truth could be everything you've got. It's like watching a high-stakes poker game where Murrow keeps calmly raising the stakes, not with money, but with courage. The beauty of the story is that it makes you feel like you're right there in that newsroom, standing shoulder to shoulder with Murrow and his team, as they go up against one of the most powerful figures in America. Good night, and good luck doesn't need a complicated plot or fancy time jumps. Its brilliance lies in its simplicity and its intensity. It takes one storyline, grips it tightly, and never lets go. It pulls you through a storm of political fear, media responsibility, and quiet but fierce bravery, all while daring you to ask yourself what you would have done if you were in Murrow's shoes. Would you have stayed silent? Or would you have stepped in front of that camera and told the truth, no matter the cost? That's the power of this story. It doesn't just tell you about history, it pulls you into it. Let's dive even deeper into the character world of Good Night. And good luck, because this film is not just a story. It's a complex web of human emotions, quiet battles, and the kind of characters who don't need big speeches or fancy entrances to leave a permanent mark on you. These characters live in a space where fear is as common as coffee, where every decision feels like stepping onto a tightrope without a safety net, and where courage isn't some loud, movie-style grandstand. It's in the small, stubborn choices they make when no one else dares to. Let's start right at the center with Edward R. Murrow. He's not a character who changes in the typical movie sense. He doesn't suddenly become a new person halfway through. His journey is not about discovering his courage. It's about holding on to it when the world tries to rip it away. Murrow walks into this story already knowing who he is. He's already respected. He's already a man with a powerful voice on television. But as the film moves forward, we see the layers peel back. We see that respect can crumble quickly in the face of political storms. We see that even a man with all the right words can't escape the crushing weight of public scrutiny and personal doubt. Murrow's development is about pressure, not watching him transform, but watching him refuse to bend under it. The more the walls close in, the straighter he stands. But it's not the kind of defiance that makes him look untouchable. Oh no, you can see the cracks. You can see the late nights, the exhaustion creeping into his eyes, the moments where even his steady voice trembles just a little. That's where his character becomes fascinating. He's not fearless. He's just relentless. His calm is not because he's not afraid. It's because he's choosing to act despite the fear. And then there's Fred Friendly, the loyal producer who's like the heartbeat next to Murrow's pulse. Fred isn't just Murrow's sidekick. He's the one juggling the chaos behind the scenes. He's the man trying to balance the weight of Murrow's moral crusade with the brutal reality of television networks, advertising money, and corporate bosses who don't care about integrity. They care about profits. Fred's character is someone you can really root for because he lives in that messy middle ground. He's constantly calculating, constantly worrying, but he never bails. His development is all about his slow march toward fully backing Murrow. Even when it becomes clear they are pushing their entire careers onto a cliff's edge. Fred doesn't have to be the one in front of the camera to be a hero. He's the one holding the line, making sure the fight can keep going. He is the classic example of the person who could have easily taken a safer path, but decides to stand firm because walking away would mean losing who he is. Now Joe and Shirley Wershba. Oh, these two are like the quiet heartbeats of the film. They're journalists working side by side. But they're also secretly married because CBS has a strict no-marriage policy for employees. This rule sits over their relationship like a silent threat. Their love story isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, but it's tense in its own unique way. Imagine fighting battles in the newsroom, knowing that your own employer could fire you just for being in love with your spouse. They share glances, they have hushed conversations, but what really makes their story so meaningful is how they're living this double life. Fighting for the truth on the outside, while quietly protecting their personal truth on the inside. Their development is subtle, but it's powerful because you see how much they're risking just to stay together and stay employed. It's a reminder that sometimes the biggest dangers aren't in the headlines. They're in the tiny rules that try to control people's personal lives. And then we come to Don Hollenbeck. Oh, Don. His character is like this slow-burning tragedy that unfolds right in front of us. Don is another CBS anchor, but he's drowning under the weight of public attacks. The newspaper critics are after him. People are calling him soft on communism. And you can see the toll it's taking on his spirit. What makes Don's arc so heartbreaking is that he's not part of Murrow's big battle in the same way. He's not the tip of the spear, but he's bleeding anyway. He's suffering the consequences of the Red Scare, just by being a journalist in this time. His mental health unravels in front of us, quietly scene by scene. He becomes a symbol of what this fear-driven climate does to people. It crushes them from the inside. His story is not about victory. His story is about what happens when the pressure becomes too much. He adds this deep, painful layer to the film because not everyone in this story gets to stand tall and fight until the end. Some people get broken. And Don's collapse makes Murrow's stand feel even more urgent. And even more lonely. What's incredibly clever about this film is that Senator McCarthy doesn't even need to be performed by an actor. The man appears only in actual news footage, and that makes him feel like this larger-than-life threat who's both everywhere and nowhere. He's not a character you can meet in a room, not someone you can out-argue face-to-face. He's a force. He's an invisible wall pressing in on all the characters. This choice shifts the story's emotional weight. McCarthy isn't the villain in a traditional sense. He's this ghostly presence that's constantly tightening the noose. You can't reason with him. You can't fight him directly. You can only expose him to the light and hope that's enough. What makes the characters in Good Night and Good Luck so rich is that they aren't larger-than-life heroes. They aren't bulletproof. They aren't perfect. They doubt themselves. They get tired. They get scared. But they keep showing up. They keep doing the work. And that's what makes them unforgettable. Their relationships are built on silent trust, on unspoken agreements, on the kind of loyalty that doesn't need to be shouted from the rooftops. Murrow and Fred don't need to keep telling each other, "I've got your back." You see it in every decision. Joe and Shirley don't need grand declarations of love. You see it in the way they protect each other's careers without hesitation. Even the moments where the team disagrees, you can feel that underneath all the arguments, they are bound together by something much bigger than their differences. These characters don't undergo magical transformations. They don't walk into the story one way and walk out as completely new people. Their development is all about the weight they carry and how they either survive it or crumble under it. It's about whether they hold their ground or get pushed off the stage. It's about whether they can keep standing up for the truth when the entire world starts shaking around them. The film gives us a character-driven storm where bravery isn't about loud moments. It's about quiet persistence. It's about people who could have made the easier choice but decided not to. That's what makes their journey so gripping. You're not watching them become someone else. You're watching them dig deeper into who they already are. And when you watch them stand in that newsroom, smoke curling around their heads, knowing that every word they speak could cost them everything, you realize that's what real character is. It's not about changing. It's about refusing to change when the whole world is begging you to. Let's stretch this even further and really live inside the performances of Good Night. And good luck, because this cast doesn't just act. They melt right into their characters until you forget they're actors at all. It's like they step into this smoky, black and white 1950s world, and they never leave. Every glance, every breath, every twitch of the fingers feels like it belongs to someone who's been living in that newsroom, breathing that recycled studio air, long before the cameras started rolling. These performances don't scream for attention. They pull you in like a quiet conversation you can't stop eavesdropping on. Let's lock in on David Strathairn, because he doesn't play Edward R. Murrow, he becomes Edward R. Murrow. The way he holds his cigarette, the way he folds his hands, the way he leans ever so slightly toward the camera as if he's not just reporting the news but weighing your very soul. That's not acting, that's full-body possession. Strathairn gives Murrow this perfect mix of distance and intimacy. He's formal, almost stiff, but you can feel the furnace burning inside him. He speaks with this surgical precision, like every word has gone through 10 filters in his head before it leaves his mouth, but somehow it never feels slow or staged. He's not reading lines. He's not performing speeches. He's quietly chiseling his way through the lies and fears of his time. And what's so fascinating is that Strathairn doesn't give you the easy hero. He doesn't smirk. He doesn't wink. He doesn't flash any Hollywood charisma. He plays Murrow as a man almost trapped by his own integrity, someone who knows the cost of his crusade before he even starts it. Watch his eyes. His eyes tell you everything. The weight, the calculation, the deep exhaustion. It's like his whole body is made of stone. But his eyes betray just how much it hurts to carry that weight. That is a performance you can't look away from. Now pivot over to George Clooney as Fred Friendly. Clooney could have easily made this a vehicle to showcase his own star power, but instead, he does something smarter. He gives Fred the frantic, buzzing energy of a man who knows the ceiling is about to collapse but still keeps the team moving. Clooney's Fred is all about quick decisions, rapid-fire exchanges, pacing in the background with that nervous determination like he's juggling grenades. He's not the public face like Murrow, but you feel his fingerprints on every broadcast. What Clooney nails is that quiet tension of being the person behind the curtain, the guy making sure the show happens, even while the pressure from the top bosses is threatening to cut the power at any second. Clooney brings this lightness, too. He knows when to slide in a dry line, a smirk, a flash of exasperation that humanizes the moment. He's not just Murrow's sidekick. He's Murrow's guardrail, the man making sure the wheels don't fly off. Clooney's performance is like the rhythm section of a band. Steady, driving, keeping the whole thing moving. Robert Downey Jr. and Patricia Clarkson as Joe and Shirley Wiersbe bring this beautiful, quiet storm to the film. They don't get the big speeches or the front-page moments, but they carve out this tender, incredibly stressful little subplot that hums underneath the main action. Downey Jr. plays Joe with this jittery, fast-talking charm. You can tell he's the guy who's used to navigating complicated situations with a quick joke or a clever deflection. But what's really lovely is the way Downey Jr. lets Joe's protectiveness bleed through, especially in the tiny moments with Shirley. It's all in the soft glances, the shoulder touches, the tension in his throat when he's weighing whether speaking up is worth risking their secret. Patricia Clarkson is just as sharp. She plays Shirley as a woman who's fully aware of the rules, the risks, and the limits of their situation, but she never plays her as a victim. Clarkson gives Shirley this composed, laser-focused energy. She's smart, she's alert, she's always 2 steps ahead. Together, Downey Jr. and Clarkson make you feel the squeeze of their forbidden romance. They don't need long, dramatic love scenes. They make you feel everything in the way they stand a little too far apart in public, and a little too close in private. It's like watching 2 people walking a tightrope, knowing the wind is about to hit them at any second. Frank Langella as William Paley is a masterclass in controlled power. Langella doesn't roar. He doesn't slam his fist on the table. Instead, he gives Paley this heavy, deliberate authority. The kind of man who can crush your career with a sentence, but somehow manages to seem reasonable while doing it. Langella's Paley walks the fine line between corporate leader and reluctant enforcer. He's not painted as a villain. He's not out to destroy Murrow. He's just painfully aware that the survival of CBS might mean pulling the plug on Murrow's crusade. Langella plays him like a man who sees the chessboard 10 moves ahead and hates the fact that sometimes you have to sacrifice your knights to save the king. The way he delivers lines is so smooth, but there's always a quiet finality behind them, like when Paley speaks, there's no more discussion. Ray Wise as Don Hollenbeck delivers a performance that sneaks up on you, and then quietly wrecks you. Hollenbeck is not the warrior. He's not the public fighter. He's the casualty you didn't see coming. Wise lets you watch this man slowly crumble under the weight of public harassment, accusations, and professional isolation. He doesn't give you a big, showy breakdown. He gives you quiet scenes where his hands tremble just a little too much, where his smile is just a shade too forced, where you can feel him slipping through the cracks and no one quite knows how to pull him back. Wise's portrayal of Don is like watching someone trying to hold their breath underwater for far too long. You want to reach through the screen and tell him to breathe, to fight, but you know the story isn't going to give him that lifeline. What makes all these performances so extraordinary is how perfectly they lock into each other. The cast works like a team that's been in the same newsroom for years. They overlap conversations. They interrupt. They bounce lines off each other with the kind of rhythm that feels completely lived in. You can almost hear the unspoken history between these characters. There's this tight, pressurized atmosphere in every scene. Like everyone knows they're sitting on a powder keg, but no one's quite sure when the match will drop. And let's not forget the small touches, the quick side glances, the shifts in posture, the way a character's voice drops half an octave when they're about to say something dangerous. This is a film where the performances are not just in the dialogue. They live in the silences, in the spaces between words, in the way Murrow's hand hovers over his cigarette, just a second too long before taking a drag. Every actor in this film is tuned to that same delicate frequency. There's a certain bravery in these performances because they resist the temptation to overact. They let the tension sit, let it stew, let it build naturally. No one is reaching for applause. No one is begging for the camera to love them. They just exist fully in their characters, letting the stakes and the fear and the quiet courage do all the heavy lifting. Watching this cast feels like watching a team of expert chefs make a 5-star meal without ever breaking a sweat. Every move is clean, precise, but absolutely loaded with flavor. Let's dig even deeper into the direction of Good Night. And good luck, because George Clooney isn't just sitting behind the camera calling shots. He's sculpting every single moment of this film with almost obsessive care. He's like a master builder, meticulously stacking every brick so that the whole structure doesn't just stand. It leans in and stares you down. Clooney is that rare kind of director who knows when to dial it all the way back, when to let silence do the heavy lifting, and when to push just hard enough to make you squirm in your seat. The way Clooney shapes the tone is pure atmosphere. It's like he's building this sealed box where the air feels heavy and the walls are pressing in just a little. He doesn't give you any breathing room. You can almost hear the tension humming under the surface. There are no modern-day distractions, no glossy Hollywood detours, Just a straight, unblinking gaze into the furnace of fear that was burning in the 1950s media world. Clooney locks us into that world. But he does it so gently that you don't even realize at first that he's caged you in. There's this creeping claustrophobia in the way the film is shot. You're always indoors. Always in tight spaces. Always trapped between desks, chairs, walls, and television cameras. There's no grand escape to wide open streets, no city skylines to give you distance. Even when the characters step outside the newsroom, they feel boxed in by the time period itself, by the era's politics, by the inescapable shadow of McCarthyism. Clooney doesn't move the camera just for the sake of movement. When the camera does drift, when it does slide in close or pull back, it's loaded with meaning. Sometimes it creeps toward a character so slowly you barely notice until suddenly you're inside their personal space, sharing their anxiety. Other times it holds still, just daring you to sit with the discomfort, making you linger with the characters as they wrestle with impossible decisions. The patience in Clooney's direction is something you rarely see. He trusts the story, trusts the performances, trusts that if he gives the scene space, the tension will grow all by itself without him needing to crank it up artificially. And then there's the choice to use real news footage. Clooney doesn't try to fake McCarthy. He doesn't recast him. He stitches McCarthy's real broadcasts right into the film like a live wire running straight through the story. That choice alone changes everything. It stops the film from feeling like a dramatization. It yanks you out of movie mode and shoves you face to face with the actual history, the actual paranoia, the actual danger of the time. By blending the fictional narrative with the real footage, Clooney makes a subtle but devastating statement. This isn't ancient history, it's real, it's close, and it echoes. And the way he slips that footage in is seamless. It doesn't feel like you're watching two separate things. The real-world terror and the fictional newsroom swirl together in perfect sync. The black and white cinematography isn't just a style, it's a psychological filter. Clooney uses the lack of color to strip the film down to its essentials. You're forced to focus on the contrasts, the hard edges, the sharp lines between light and shadow. He doesn't let you get lost in visual candy. He's making you stare at the bones of the story, at the raw structure of conflict. And the way he uses those deep shadows, it's like paranoia has a physical form. Sometimes characters melt into the darkness at the edges of the frame. Sometimes they're isolated under harsh, surgical lights, looking like they're trapped on a chessboard with nowhere to run. The visual language Clooney builds is whispering to you the whole time. Nothing here is safe, nothing is fully visible, nothing is fully hidden either. The pacing is masterful because Clooney knows how to let the suspense breathe. He never rushes to the payoff. He lets the pressure mount, lets the silences stretch just long enough to make you feel like maybe someone's about to crack. Maybe the next word will be the last straw. Some scenes simmer quietly, like a pot about to boil over. Others come at you fast, like when the newsroom is scrambling under a tight deadline. But even then Clooney resists the urge to speed things up Hollywood style. He's more interested in the internal pacing, the emotional ticking clock inside the characters' heads. You don't see explosions, but you feel implosions. You feel the slow grind of fear chewing through these people from the inside out. The sound design is one of the most quietly brilliant tools Clooney uses. The click-clack of typewriters, the soft shuffle of papers, the buzz of the broadcast equipment. All those background sounds are part of the tension machine. They're not just noise. They're like the heartbeat of the newsroom, always pulsing, always reminding you that something is happening, that time is ticking, that decisions are being made in real time. The soundscape wraps around you without you even realizing, until suddenly the silence hits you like a wall. Clooney knows when to cut everything out and let the quiet ring loud in your ears. When Murrow steps up to deliver one of his signature broadcasts, the world narrows. You hear the soft hiss of the mic, the faint rattle of a cigarette, and nothing else. The silence becomes a stage, and the words hit like thunder. Even the music is deployed like a scalpel. Clooney doesn't drown the film in sweeping orchestral soundtracks. He lets jazz slide in with perfect timing. The live performances by Diane Reeves are not background music. They're mood setters, atmosphere shapers. The jazz fills the gaps between the heavy newsroom scenes, like a smoky exhale after holding your breath. It gives the film texture, a little rhythm, but never pulls focus. The music knows when to step forward, and when to fade into the wallpaper. And there's something really cool about the way Clooney directs the rhythm of conversations. He doesn't clean up the overlaps. He lets people interrupt each other, talk over each other, hesitate mid-sentence. It feels messy in the most beautiful, realistic way. It feels like an actual newsroom where people are racing against the clock and scrambling to keep up. Clooney isn't interested in perfect, polished dialogue delivery. He wants the chaos, the sweat, the imperfect cadence of people under pressure. That's what makes the film pulse with life. Clooney also brings a really sharp eye to the way power flows in a room. Watch the blocking, the way people are positioned in relation to each other. Who stands? Who sits? Who leans in? Who retreats to the shadows? It's subtle, but it's a visual map of who's holding the cards in each scene. In the CBS boardroom, you can practically feel the weight of the network bearing down on Murrow just by the way the distance is arranged between him and Paley. It's not just dialogue, it's geometry. Clooney uses space like a silent actor in every scene. What makes his direction so magnetic is that it's not screaming at you. It's a quiet grip around your collar that never lets go. Clooney doesn't need to shout to make his point. He directs with a calm, confident hand that knows exactly when to push and when to let things breathe. He weaves tension, style, and story together in a way that feels effortless but is actually meticulously designed. Let's really unpack the cinematography of Good Night. And good luck, because this isn't just about pointing a camera and shooting a scene. It's about creating a visual universe that wraps around you like thick, inescapable smoke. Robert Elswit's cinematography is like a quiet puppet master pulling all the strings behind the story's tension. He's not showing you the 1950s, he's submerging you in them. He's not begging for your attention with loud colors or sweeping shots. No, he's sneaking up on you, building pressure with angles, light, and shadow until you realize you're trapped inside the story, right alongside the characters. First, let's talk about the black and white decision. It isn't just a throwback to the era. It's not a gimmick. It's a calculated move that slams the door on any comfort the audience might be looking for. Without color, the world is stripped down to cold facts. Light or dark, exposed or hidden, right or wrong. It's almost like the film itself is refusing to let you get distracted. There's no soft sunset to lean on, no colorful set pieces to hide in. Every corner is stark. Every beam of light is a blade. It forces you to confront every wrinkle on a character's face, every bead of sweat, every twitch, every nervous glance. It gives the film a rawness, a naked honesty that perfectly mirrors the battle Murrow is fighting on the screen. The way Elswit uses shadows is almost like he's weaponizing them. The shadows in this film aren't just there to create mood, they're practically alive. They cling to the edges of the frame. They creep along the walls. Sometimes they nearly swallow entire characters, leaving just a sliver of face or a flash of a cigarette. There are moments when a character's face is half drenched in darkness, as if visually showing the tightrope they're walking between courage and fear, between duty and self-preservation. These shadows are constant silent characters, always lurking, always watching, reminding you that danger is baked into the walls of the newsroom itself. The framing in this film is ruthless in the best way. Elswit loves to use confined, boxed-in compositions that make the characters look like they're trapped, hemmed in by filing cabinets, newsroom equipment, narrow hallways, and windows that reflect the very media they're trying to control. You're never allowed to feel like there's any real escape. Even when Murrow and his team are supposedly off the clock, the framing keeps them penned in. It's like the weight of the broadcast and the looming presence of McCarthy are chasing them from room to room, frame to frame. The camera is always sitting just close enough to make you sweat, but just far enough to let you observe the slow, careful disintegration of comfort zones. Elswit is a genius with his angles. He knows exactly when to look up at a character to make them seem larger than life, and when to look down at them to make them seem crushed by the system. Watch how Murrow is filmed during his on-air monologues, tight head-on, like he's talking directly to you. The lights burn down on him, the background fades into black, and there's no visual escape. You're locked into his words. It's not just a broadcast. It's a direct challenge, a visual confrontation. And then watch the boardroom scenes. Wider shots, more space between characters, but the distance isn't comforting. It's cold, calculated, like you're being invited to eavesdrop on a corporate chess match where one wrong move could cost someone their job or their career. One of the most brilliant touches in the cinematography is the use of reflections and glass. Ellsworth often frames characters behind windows, through glass doors, or trapped in television screens, as if to say, "You are always being watched." Your words don't just float into the air. They are recorded, dissected, played back, judged. The reflection tricks are subtle but powerful. Sometimes Murrow is reflected in multiple panes of glass, fragmented, as if he's caught between identities. The journalist, the employee, the reluctant hero. These layers of glass also mirror the layered pressures in the film. The personal risks, the professional boundaries, the moral dilemmas. Ellsworth doesn't just film a scene, he folds it in on itself. Let's not forget how Ellsworth uses depth. He's not content to just let the foreground do all the work. He fills the background with life, flickering monitors, scribbling coworkers, glowing signs, distant figures pacing, all adding a low hum of activity that feels like a pulse beating behind every scene. You can feel the newsroom breathing. And sometimes, just to shake you up, Ellsworth flips it and gives you a shallow depth of field, snapping all the focus onto Murrow while the world behind him blurs into insignificance. It's a visual reminder that, in that moment, nothing matters but the words he's saying. The newsroom itself becomes this fascinating visual maze, and the camera explores it like a nervous, pacing thought. There are slow tracking shots through corridors and around corners that almost feel like the camera is eavesdropping, like it's peeking over shoulders, like it's sneaking through the very system Murrow is trying to expose. And when the camera moves quickly, it's never frantic. It's controlled, focused, always with purpose. There's an urgency to it, but not chaos. It's like the camera is carrying the weight of the ticking clock, but refuses to panic. Ellsworth also knows how to milk the smallest details for maximum visual power. A close-up of a hand nervously flicking ash into a tray. A side-angle shot of Murrow's cigarette glowing in the dark just before he speaks. A lingering look at a reel-to-reel tape machine as it spins out the truth, one revolution at a time. These tiny, almost throwaway visuals are loaded with tension and meaning. They make the world of the film feel tactile, smoky, alive. The jazz club scenes are another layer of brilliance. The cinematography there softens just slightly, not enough to break the film's visual language, but enough to offer a momentary breath. The lighting is still moody, still sharp, but now it dances with the rhythm of the music. It's a controlled looseness, like the film is briefly letting its tie loosen before diving back into the grind of the newsroom. These scenes aren't just filler. Visually, they offer contrast. A moment where the shadows are less threatening and the focus shifts to mood rather than survival. And let's talk about how Ellsworth seamlessly merges the real McCarthy footage into the film's texture. The grainy, high-contrast visuals of the archival clips don't clash with the rest of the cinematography. They lock in perfectly. There's no awkward visual jump, no sense that you've suddenly stepped outside the movie. Instead, it feels like the film world and the real world are bleeding into each other, connected by the same visual DNA. The cinematography is never passive in this film. It's actively working, shaping, pushing the emotional weight of every scene. It's there to squeeze the tension tighter, to magnify the smallest cracks in the character's armor, to build this heavy, almost suffocating atmosphere where every glance, every shadow, every shaft of light feels loaded with purpose. Ellsworth doesn't just light a scene, he weaponizes the light. He doesn't just frame a shot, he traps the characters inside it. And as a viewer, you can't help but feel that you're right there in the room, caught in the same invisible web, staring down the same impossible choices. The editing and pacing of Good Night and Good Luck are like the quiet heartbeat of the film. You might not notice it at first, but it controls everything. Stephen Murrow, the editor, doesn't just cut from one scene to the next. No, he orchestrates the rhythm of the film like he's conducting a tense piece of music. Every cut, every lingering shot, every silence is placed with surgical precision. It's like the film is constantly inhaling and exhaling, not too fast, not too slow, but always with just enough tension in the air to keep you slightly on edge, like you're sitting right there in the newsroom with Murrow's cigarette smoke curling around you. The pacing is deliberate, but it's not sluggish. The film knows it's not a race. It isn't interested in sprinting from one dramatic moment to the next. It's more like a slow, steady drumbeat that doesn't let up. It keeps pushing forward with this constant low-level hum of urgency. It lets conversations breathe. It lets glances hang in the air, and it knows exactly when to tighten the grip. When you're watching Murrow deliver his broadcasts, the film doesn't rush through them. It leans into the weight of his words. The editing holds those moments just long enough to make you feel the silence between sentences, just long enough to let you sit in the discomfort, to absorb the courage it takes to say those things out loud. And then, when the story shifts back to the behind-the-scenes drama, the pacing subtly quickens. The conversations overlap, the phones ring, the paper flies, the tension bubbles just a little faster, like a newsroom in controlled chaos. It's not frantic, but you can feel the heat rising under the collar. One of the sneakiest tricks the editing plays is how it makes the transitions between the real archival footage of McCarthy and the fictional newsroom scenes feel absolutely seamless. There's no jarring snap when you cut from David Strathairn to Senator McCarthy's actual televised speeches. The rhythm doesn't stumble. The tone doesn't shift. The film is edited in a way that blends these two worlds until they feel like one continuous, unbroken timeline. It's like you're watching history unfold live, as if you could just lean forward and step into the television screen. Murrow never lets you feel the seams. The editing is razor-sharp in its timing. There are moments where the tension is built entirely on the length of a pause. A cut that comes a second too soon would kill the weight of a moment. But Murrow knows when to let silence sit, when to let Murrow's stare linger on the camera just long enough to make your spine straighten. Those extra beats aren't wasted, they're packed with meaning. Sometimes the editing cuts away to a character's subtle reaction, an editor shifting in his seat, a producer biting his lip, and that's where the real story is hiding. It's not just in what's said. It's in the unsaid. The film knows how to let those tiny moments bloom without ever dragging. And the pacing is smart. It doesn't hit you with a false sense of urgency. It's confident enough to trust that the slow simmer of pressure is far more satisfying than an artificial sprint. It builds the stakes gradually, layering on the tension without needing car chases or explosions. It's like watching a chess game where every move could tip the balance, and the editing makes sure you feel that quiet danger in every transition. Even the cutaways to the jazz singer are timed like a breath of air, not to interrupt the story, but to give it just enough room to keep the rhythm from becoming suffocating. These scenes are edited with a different cadence, a looser, more fluid tempo that contrasts beautifully with the tight, coiled energy of the newsroom. It's not random. It's a deliberate pacing choice to let the audience exhale just slightly before diving back into the storm. The editing also keeps the flow clean. There are no wasted detours. The story moves like a needle threading its way through every scene with efficiency. Even when the film briefly touches on personal subplots, like the secret marriage between two CBS employees, the pacing doesn't sag. The editing trims just enough to keep those threads tight, never letting them meander. You get just enough to feel the stakes, just enough to understand the emotional cost, but the film never loses its stride. The rhythm of the newsroom scenes is crafted to feel alive. The editing doesn't chop them up like a flashy music video. It lets them buzz and pulse with natural energy. You hear the background conversations, the rustle of papers, the clack of typewriters. The edits are quick enough to keep you alert but never so fast that you feel jarred. It's a balance that makes the newsroom feel like a living, breathing organism. And the tension is ratcheted up not by cutting faster, but by cutting smarter. The film knows that a well-timed silence can be far more intense than a quick cut. Murrow leans into that, often holding on a character's face just a beat longer than you expect, forcing you to feel the weight of their decision, the burden of their words, the silent fear of what might come next. The pacing also respects the intelligence of the audience. It doesn't spoon-feed you. It trusts you to keep up with the flow of conversations, the shifts between the newsroom and the broadcasts, the interwoven storylines. The editing doesn't hold your hand. It expects you to walk alongside it, to pay attention, to piece things together as the story unfolds. Even the ending is handled with a kind of rhythmic confidence. It doesn't build to a big crescendo. It stays true to its tone. The editing lets the final moments settle quietly, without rushing to tie a neat bow around everything. The pacing respects the complexity of the story it's telling, never breaking its steady march, never sacrificing its quiet power for the sake of flashy speed. This is editing that knows the art of restraint, pacing that knows when to push and when to pull, when to let you breathe and when to squeeze your chest. It's not just about stitching scenes together. It's about building a rhythm that carries you through the story without ever letting you drift. It's a controlled, careful dance that keeps the tension alive from the first frame to the last. The soundtrack and score of Good Night and Good Luck don't just sit politely in the background like a quiet guest at a party. They drift, they linger, they become a part of the air you breathe while watching the film. The choice of music here is not just a stylistic flourish. It is a deliberate, living pulse that quietly wraps around the entire narrative without ever demanding your attention. And that's the beauty of it. The music doesn't scream to be noticed, but if you listen closely, you'll realize it's doing some of the most essential heavy lifting in the film. Instead of the usual grand, cinematic score with trumpets blasting or violins soaring at emotional peaks, the film slips into the smoky, velvety world of jazz, particularly the unforgettable performances of Diane Reeves. Now, this isn't the kind of jazz that pops in for a quick tap of the foot and then steps aside. This is the kind of jazz that soaks into the film's bones. The music isn't just there to entertain you. It's there to hold the film's hand as it walks you through tension, pressure, fear, and small, stolen moments of humanity. These jazz pieces sneak in at just the right moments, not as background noise, but as a kind of soul soundtrack playing in the hidden corners of the story. The music feels like it belongs to the characters, like it's part of their world. It's not floating above the story, trying to guide our emotions from the outside. It's inside the story, flowing naturally, as if these characters might have actually gone out to hear this music on a Friday night after another grueling day battling the corporate giants and political titans. The jazz doesn't just fill the silence, it respects it. It gives it weight. It's not trying to break the tension. It's there to let you sit in it, to feel the human heartbeat beneath all the newsprint and cigarette smoke. What's especially brilliant is the way the film trusts the power of silence. There are moments where the absence of music is almost deafening. Edward R. Murrow's iconic on-air addresses are delivered with no sweetening, no soft piano creeping in, no strings swelling behind his words. The silence is the point. You can almost hear the static buzzing in the air, the weight of the words hanging just a little too long in the quiet room. The film isn't afraid to let silence take center stage. In fact, it treats silence like one of the main instruments in its musical score. And when the silence is broken by the soft, smooth voice of Diane Reeves, it feels earned. It feels like you've been holding your breath, and suddenly someone finally lets you exhale. The jazz itself is chosen with such care that it's almost surgical. It's not overly polished jazz. It's not meant to be flashy or theatrical. It's the kind of music that curls around the edges of the frame. Music that has a little scratch, a little warmth. Music that feels like it belongs in a quiet, dimly lit club where the clink of glasses and the low murmur of voices mix with the sound of a trumpet. It gives the film a mood, a texture, a kind of quiet rebellion. The film is about journalists standing up against political fearmongering, but the soundtrack doesn't come charging in with a trumpet of heroism. No, it gives you jazz. It gives you subtlety. It gives you music that speaks softly but lingers in your head long after the credits roll. The way the soundtrack is woven into the film is like threading a needle with invisible string. It never pulls focus away from the story. It never shouts over the dialogue. It never elbows its way into the spotlight. Instead, it floats in, fills the space, then drifts out almost like a memory. The transitions are so seamless that sometimes you barely notice the music has begun until you realize your foot is tapping or your head is slightly nodding. And then, just as effortlessly, the music fades, leaving you right back in the charged newsroom, where glances speak louder than words and every phone call might be a political landmine. Even the placement of the jazz performances within the film isn't random. They're positioned like punctuation marks, like pauses between intense paragraphs of a novel. When the tension in the newsroom gets thick enough to cut with a knife, the film gives you a moment in the jazz club. It's not a break, it's a breath. It's a space where the characters might mentally go to escape, where the audience can process the weight of what's happening. It's like the soundtrack is saying, don't look away, but take a second. Feel this. Let it settle. The sound design itself is part of the film's musicality. The click-clack of typewriters, the scratch of pencils on paper, the creak of office chairs, the clinking of coffee cups. All of it builds a rhythm that works hand in hand with the score. Even the sound of silence is part of the music here. The moments where you hear nothing but the faint buzz of an old television, the slight hum of the studio lights. Those moments stretch, they echo, they hold you still, making you listen more closely. The film plays with that silence as confidently as it plays with the jazz. The recurring use of Diane Reeves' songs creates this beautiful thread that keeps looping back to you. Her voice isn't just a lovely addition, it becomes an emotional anchor. It holds the edges of the film together, giving it warmth, giving it weight, giving it a heartbeat. It's the cool undercurrent that balances the razor-sharp tension of Murrow's on-air battles and the stormy pressure inside the CBS offices. The film knows exactly what it's doing with sound. It never overwhelms you. It never uses the soundtrack as a crutch to force feelings on you. Instead, it offers the music as a gentle hand on your shoulder, guiding you, supporting you, but never dragging you. The restraint is masterful. The jazz, the silences, the natural sounds of the newsroom. All of it comes together to create a soundscape that's quietly immersive, deeply textured, and effortlessly cool. This is not a soundtrack that begs to be noticed. It's a soundtrack that sits quietly beside you, confident that when you remember the film, you'll remember the way it made you feel. And that feeling will sound a lot like the soft hum of jazz in a room full of smoke and truth. Good Night and Good Luck is a film that doesn't just tell a story. It dares you to wrestle with some seriously heavyweight themes. And it does it with a cool, unshaken stare, like the film is saying, "You ready to think about this?" One of the most powerful threads running through this story is the theme of truth. But this isn't the easy, glossy version of truth we like to put on banners. No, this is the kind of truth that's messy, dangerous, and sometimes very lonely. The film dives headfirst into the idea that speaking the truth comes with a price. It paints a world where telling the truth isn't about looking heroic on TV. It's about risking your career, your reputation, and sometimes even your personal safety. Edward R. Murrow doesn't get a red carpet rolled out for his bravery. He gets phone calls at odd hours, icy glares from colleagues, and the constant threat of being silenced. The film nudges the audience to ask, would you have the same courage if your job was on the line? Then there's the theme of fear. Oh yes, fear is everywhere in this movie. But it's not the fear of monsters or car chases. It's the quieter, more terrifying fear that creeps into boardrooms, newsrooms, and dinner conversations. It's the fear of stepping out of line. The film so brilliantly captures this atmosphere, where people aren't just afraid of losing their jobs, they're afraid of being labeled. In an era when the wrong word could get you blacklisted, when the wrong friend could put your name on a government list, fear doesn't explode, it simmers. And you can see it in every nervous glance, every hesitant handshake, every uncomfortable silence. The film shows how fear isn't always loud. It can whisper, it can linger, and worst of all, it can make good people stay quiet. One of the boldest themes the film throws on the table is the role of the press and media in society. This isn't just a film about TV journalists reporting stories. It's a film that questions what journalism is supposed to be. Is the news just about reporting both sides and moving on? Or is there a moral responsibility to call out lies and injustices, even when it's unpopular? The film doesn't hand you an easy answer on a silver platter. It pushes you to think. It shows that the media can either challenge power or get used by it. And sometimes the line between those two can be razor thin. You can feel the pressure on Murrow and his team as they walk that line, knowing that one misstep could bring the entire building crashing down on them. Another fascinating layer is the theme of personal integrity versus corporate interest. This isn't just a David versus Goliath story. It's a tug-of-war happening inside each character. CBS as a company isn't just battling McCarthy, it's battling itself. The sponsors want happy, non-controversial stories that won't scare off viewers or advertisers. The bosses want smooth sailing and good ratings. The journalists want to dig, to question, to poke the bear. And the tension between these goals hums constantly in the background. It's not some grand showdown. It's the slow grind of office politics mixed with the weight of national responsibility. The film shows how courage isn't always about standing in front of a crowd. It's about pushing back in private meetings, holding your ground in smoky offices, and choosing to air that story even when it feels like the walls are closing in. What's also fascinating is how the film explores the danger of passive complicity. It's not just about the villains and the heroes. It's about the people in the middle, the ones who watch from the sidelines and convince themselves that silence is safer. The film doesn't let those people off the hook. It's quietly asking, what happens when too many people choose to look away? What happens when fear becomes so normal that no one even questions it anymore? It's a theme that feels like it reaches right through the screen and grabs you by the collar. And let's not miss the sly commentary on television itself. Murrow's famous sign-off, "Good night and good luck," isn't just a polite farewell, it's a warning. The film is aware that television can either be a tool for truth or a shiny box of distractions. It asks whether the powerful platform of TV will be used to hold people accountable, or simply to entertain the masses and sell soap. It's a cheeky little nod to the growing influence of media, and it still feels sharply relevant. The film also wraps itself around the theme of moral responsibility. Murrow and his team don't chase the McCarthy story because it's trending or because it will boost their ratings. They chase it because they know that if they don't, no one else will. The idea here is that responsibility doesn't always fall on the person with the biggest platform. It falls on the person willing to use their voice when it matters most, whether they have an audience of millions or just a handful of people willing to listen. What makes the delivery of these themes so punchy is that the film never preaches. It never waves a moral flag in your face. It simply shows you a series of rooms where choices are made, where people hesitate, where people light another cigarette while deciding whether to speak up or stay quiet. The film isn't yelling its message, it's whispering it, and somehow, that whisper feels louder than any speech. Even the subtle theme of isolation snakes through the film. Murrow, for all his public presence, often seems completely alone. You can almost feel the distance between him and his colleagues as the pressure mounts. The camera sometimes holds him in these quiet, empty spaces, surrounded by people, but somehow apart from them. It's a quiet reminder that standing up for something doesn't always come with applause. It can come with a long stretch of silence. All these themes don't just float on the surface. They wrap themselves tightly into the story, into the visuals, into the dialogue, into the pacing, into the music. They're baked into the DNA of the film. It's not just telling you what the themes are. It's making you feel them in your gut. You can't walk away from this film without chewing on its questions. What's the price of truth? How much power does fear really have? And who's responsible for standing up when it seems like no one else will? The film doesn't close those doors. It leaves them wide open, and the jazz continues to play softly in the distance while you sit there, still thinking. Now, when it comes to visual effects and CGI in Good Night and Good Luck, here's the twist. This film isn't the kind that comes crashing in with giant robots, exploding cars, or dazzling digital landscapes that make your eyes pop. Nope. This film is playing in a completely different arena. It doesn't rely on the big flashy spectacle to grab your attention. Instead, it pulls you in with its quiet, deliberate authenticity. The effects in this film are so seamlessly woven into the fabric of the story that most of the time, you probably don't even realize you're looking at effects at all. That's the genius of it. It's not about showing off. It's about world building so carefully that the visual tricks practically vanish right before your eyes. One of the most interesting things here is how George Clooney and his team used real archival footage of Senator Joseph McCarthy instead of hiring an actor to play him. And this decision is like a stealth visual effect in itself. Integrating black and white archival clips into the flow of a modern film, blending them into staged newsroom sets, and making it all feel like one coherent world, that takes serious technical skill. It's the kind of visual blending that could easily feel choppy or awkward if it wasn't handled with precision. But here it's smooth. It's like the historical footage, and the actors are living in the same room, breathing the same air, sharing the same cigarette smoke. The transitions between real news broadcasts and the staged studio moments are so crisp that the line between documentary and drama almost disappears. It feels like you're flipping channels inside the story itself. The use of black and white cinematography is also a kind of visual effect in its own right. It's not just a stylistic throwback, it's a carefully calculated choice that does some heavy lifting for the film's atmosphere. Shooting in black and white wasn't the easy road either. It meant the production team had to design sets, costumes, lighting, and even makeup to look good not in color, but in the rich spectrum of shadows and highlights. And let's be honest, black and white can be unforgiving. Every detail stands out. There's nowhere to hide. So what does the film do? It leans into that challenge and turns it into a visual advantage. The contrast, the sharpness, the grain. It all wraps around the story like an old newsroom photo come to life. The effect isn't flashy, but it's deeply immersive. You don't just watch the era. You feel like you've walked into it. There are no digital monsters here, no city skylines crafted out of pixels. But make no mistake, the technical team still had plenty of visual work on their hands. Just think about the set extensions, the subtle digital cleanups, the invisible CGI that helps build a 1950s newsroom and streetscape without pulling you out of the moment. You don't walk into a shot and think, "Oh, that's a green screen." You walk into it and think, "Wow, I'm sitting right there in that cramped, smoky office with those anxious journalists." And that's where the visual craftsmanship shines. It never yells for attention. It simply does its job so well that you forget it's even there. Even something as simple as creating the flicker and glow of old TV screens is a kind of quiet visual effect that adds to the authenticity. The glass reflections, the grainy broadcasts, the soft halo around the studio lights. All these little touches are carefully designed to place you exactly in the right time and place. The visual effects team isn't trying to dazzle you with spectacle. They're building an invisible time machine, and you're riding in it without realizing it. The practical effects are also right on point. The sets feel lived in. The offices don't look like perfect, polished Hollywood recreations. They look like they've been working for years, with piles of papers, clunky old typewriters, and coffee cups that probably haven't been washed since last week. The ashtrays, the soft shuffle of papers, the constant buzz of studio equipment. All those practical details are the scaffolding holding up the film's visual world. There's a real sense of texture here. You can almost smell the cigarette smoke curling in the air. You can practically hear the squeak of leather chairs and the metallic clang of old microphones. That's practical world building at its finest. And when it comes to the few subtle digital tricks that are present, maybe a touch of background cleanup, a quiet nudge to blend the archive footage more smoothly, it's all done with such a soft hand that you'd need to squint to spot it. The film's visual effects team doesn't walk into the room wearing fireworks. They come in wearing a tailored suit, quietly making sure everything looks exactly as it should, and then they slip out without you ever noticing they were there. So while this film doesn't serve you sky battles or digital creatures, what it gives you is something even harder to pull off. Visual effects so seamless, so natural, that they become part of the wallpaper. They serve the story without distraction. They enhance the atmosphere without stealing the spotlight. They help the audience time travel without anyone realizing they've just stepped into a different decade. That's the kind of quiet technical magic that deserves a round of applause, even if you didn't notice the trick while it was happening. The set design and locations in Good Night and Good Luck don't just sit there looking pretty. They carry the weight of the story on their shoulders. Every desk, every chair, every flickering light in those smoky newsrooms feels like it has a story of its own. You can practically hear the clatter of typewriter keys bouncing off the walls, smell the faint bitterness of cold coffee sitting abandoned on a cluttered desk, and feel the hum of those big, boxy television cameras as they slowly roll across the studio floor. The production design is not about creating some shiny, idealized version of the 1950s. It's about making you believe you're right there, in the middle of the tension, in a world where every corner of the room is packed with nervous energy and quiet urgency. What's brilliant is how the set design doesn't go overboard trying to convince you it's the 1950s. It doesn't feel like a museum or a vintage catalog photo shoot. It feels alive. The newsrooms are cramped and buzzing, the walls are thin, the equipment is bulky and slightly imperfect. Cameras on big rolling wheels, cables snaking across the floor like lazy vines, lights that burn just a little too hot. It's not just visually accurate, it's textured. You don't get the sense that anything has been placed there for decoration. Everything looks used, as if it's been part of this newsroom long before the camera showed up. The cigarette smoke hanging in the air isn't just a stylish touch, it's like the oxygen of the place. It fills the space, clouds the judgment, and feels almost like a silent character lurking in the background. And then there's the incredible balance between studio spaces and personal spaces. In the studio, everything feels tight, claustrophobic, almost suffocating. The walls seem to press in as the pressure builds. The bright lights of the studio are harsh and unforgiving, leaving nowhere to hide. These aren't grand, sweeping sets. They're compact, controlled environments where every sound echoes just a little too loudly, where every glance carries weight. You can feel the eyes of the sponsors, the bosses, the audience watching every move. The studio is where the story goes public, but it's the offices and hallways where the real chess game happens, where whispered conversations, tense decisions, and ethical battles quietly unfold. The film also masterfully uses the bland, corporate backdrop to its advantage. The offices are lined with plain furniture, file cabinets, gray walls, and nothing flashy. And somehow, this simplicity works perfectly. It tells you that this is a world focused on the job, not the style. It's a place where people are grinding out stories under flickering fluorescent lights, where the coffee is probably terrible, and where there's no time for fancy wallpaper. Even the homes, when briefly shown, are modest, restrained, not glamorous escapes but simple extensions of the characters' working lives. This is a world of workaholics, where personal space barely separates from professional pressure. The locations outside the studio, though limited, are just as purposeful. When we step outside the newsroom bubble, it's not to explore sprawling cityscapes. It's to reinforce the isolation and the social pressure closing in on these journalists. The bars, the corporate offices, the sterile hallways, they all carry this quiet tension. There's a coldness in many of these locations, as if the world outside isn't much safer than the one inside the hot, blinding studio lights. You get the sense that danger isn't just waiting outside. It's already crept into every corner of this world. The props themselves are also unsung heroes in this film. The microphones aren't sleek, modern devices. They're these big, bulky pieces that almost seem too large for the room, and yet they're perfect. The stacks of paper, the heavy glass ashtrays, the reel-to-reel tape machines, the flickering television monitors. Each one is meticulously placed and feels like it belongs right where it is. Nothing feels staged. Nothing feels out of place. You can almost hear the props groaning under the weight of years of use. What makes the set design even more impressive is how it becomes a mirror for the characters' emotional states. When the pressure mounts, the spaces seem to close in. When fear creeps in, the rooms feel colder, emptier, even when they're filled with people. The claustrophobia of the newsroom isn't just a physical design, it's a psychological one. It traps the characters in the weight of their decisions. You can feel the walls of the studio inching closer every time Murrow prepares to speak. The space itself seems to pulse with anxiety. And let's not forget how the monochrome aesthetic enhances the impact of the sets. Stripped of color, the design relies on contrast, on texture, on shape. The glossy shine of the studio desk, the dull gray of the filing cabinets, the dark suits against white shirts. All these visual elements pop in a way that's subtle but powerful. The black and white palette sharpens the details. It forces you to notice the way light bounces off a metal microphone, or how cigarette smoke curls like a ghost through the frame. The simplicity of the palette makes every shadow, every reflection, every beam of light part of the storytelling. The locations don't sprawl across cities or continents. They stay focused, intimate, pressing. They serve as the perfect backdrop to a story that's not about chasing villains across the globe, but about chasing the truth in tight rooms under sharp lights. The set design and locations ground the film in a world that feels so real you could almost step into it. Sit at one of those cluttered desks, pour yourself a cup of that bitter newsroom coffee, and light up a cigarette while waiting for the next big story to break. The design doesn't just support the film, it breathes life into it. The dialogue and script of Good Night and Good Luck aren't just tools to push the story forward. They are the heartbeat of the film. Every word, every pause, every sharp exchange is carefully chosen, razor sharp, and perfectly balanced between intellectual weight and raw human emotion. This isn't the kind of movie where characters ramble on for the sake of sounding clever or poetic. Here, the words carry weight because they have to. These journalists and broadcasters live in a world where every sentence can make or break a career, where each phrase could light a fire or put it out. The script understands that, and it leans into that pressure with thrilling precision. The dialogue has this natural rhythm, like real people speaking under real pressure, but with just enough polish to make it snap and crackle on screen. Edward R. Murrow doesn't speak like a movie hero. He speaks like a man carefully balancing his words on the edge of a knife. His speeches, though simple, land like punches because they're driven by integrity, not by showy language. His famous line, "We will not walk in fear one of another," doesn't just sound good. It sounds like a line drawn in the sand. And that's what the script does so beautifully throughout. It crafts moments where words mean something. These aren't throwaway conversations. Every word is a loaded gun. The brilliance of the script is how it layers conversations. On the surface, they can seem polite, even routine, discussing news schedules, sponsors, the mechanics of a television broadcast. But just beneath that is a whole storm of tension, doubt, and personal risk. When the characters talk about the logistics of producing a story, what they're really talking about is the cost of truth, the weight of responsibility, and the risk of standing up to powerful forces. The dialogue dances between the personal and the political without ever needing to announce it loudly. It trusts the audience to hear the stakes between the lines. What makes the script even more electrifying is the way it balances the public speeches with the private, behind-the-scenes exchanges. When Murrow delivers his monologues to the camera, it's like time stops. These are moments where the language crystallizes into pure power. His words are not just meant to inform, they are meant to challenge, to provoke, to shake the audience awake. And then when the cameras switch off, the dialogue shifts gears. The backstage conversations are tight, quick, often clipped. There's a sense of urgency in every exchange. Decisions need to be made, deadlines are looming, and fear is creeping in. The script captures the hum of a newsroom perfectly, that constant pulse of people working under the clock, barely stopping to breathe. And the best part? The dialogue doesn't waste time spelling out everything. It respects the audience's intelligence. When characters reference McCarthy, censorship, or internal conflicts, the script trusts you to connect the dots. There's a smart economy of words. People speak as if they already know the stakes, because they do. This gives the conversations a natural flow, as if we've simply been dropped into the middle of this world, and we're expected to keep up. The film never holds your hand, and that makes the dialogue feel even more authentic. The supporting characters get their own share of sharp lines too. They're not just there to fill the room. They bring their own anxieties, frustrations, and dry humor into the mix. Joe Wershba, Fred Friendly, and even the network executives have these perfectly crafted exchanges where you can feel their inner conflict bubbling beneath the surface. Whether it's nervous banter, quiet pushback, or desperate attempts to hold on to their jobs, every conversation feels like a step in a larger battle. Even the silences between lines speak volumes. Sometimes a raised eyebrow, a slow exhale, or a glance across the newsroom says just as much as a whole page of dialogue. The script also does something quite rare. It uses real historical speeches without making them feel like cut-and-paste history lessons. The speeches fit seamlessly into the flow of the film. They don't feel like grand detours or forced moments of drama. They feel like the natural consequence of everything that's come before them. When Murrow speaks directly to the camera, it's not just a moment for the audience. It's a reckoning for every character in that newsroom. There's also this brilliant undercurrent of dry humor threaded throughout the dialogue. It's not laugh-out-loud comedy, but there are these sly, sardonic moments where the characters throw out sharp, witty lines to cut the tension. These little flashes of humor make the world feel more real. Even in the middle of all the danger and drama, people still crack jokes, still try to lighten the load, even if only for a second. The pacing of the dialogue is another standout feature. It's quick but not frantic. It's deliberate but never sluggish. Conversations bounce naturally from one character to another, and even the moments of hesitation or awkward silence feel earned. The rhythm of the script matches the pulse of the newsroom. Fast, tense, but always under control. What you really walk away with, though, is the memory of those lines that burn themselves into the story's core. The kind of lines that journalists probably scrawled on their notepads or pinned to their desks in the years that followed. Lines that challenge, that provoke, that refuse to be ignored. The dialogue in Good Night and Good Luck isn't there to just sound good. It's there to make you think, to make you lean forward, and to remind you that words have power. The script doesn't try to entertain you with flashy speeches. It tries to engage you with meaningful ones. And it does so masterfully, one carefully chosen word at a time. Good Night and Good Luck is a fascinating film when it comes to genre because it doesn't fit neatly into one box. On the surface, it's a historical drama, a political thriller, a journalism-centered story, but the way it executes its genre is so unique that it almost feels like the film is quietly rewriting the rulebook while you watch it. It's not here to give you the usual thrills of a political drama filled with shouting matches, high-speed chases, or fist-pounding courtroom showdowns. Instead, it pulls you into a world of quiet tension, where the most explosive weapons are words, decisions, and moral stands. This film proves that you don't need guns, car chases, or manufactured suspense to make your heart race. Sometimes, watching people simply decide to tell the truth is more gripping than any traditional action sequence. One of the most exciting things about how the film handles its genre is that it completely flips the expectations. Normally, in stories about big political fights, you'd expect some grand victory moment, a clear win where the hero conquers the villain and everyone cheers. But here, the tension is subtler and more realistic. The film strips away the sugarcoating that's often found in similar stories. It doesn't offer a clean-cut triumph or a manufactured feel-good ending. Instead, it focuses on the personal cost of integrity, the quiet bravery that doesn't get parades or headlines. It forces you to feel the weight of what it means to stand up in a world where silence is safer. When you think about political dramas or historical films, they often lean heavily into speeches that try too hard to sound profound or over-dramatized sequences that make sure you don't miss the important parts. This film avoids all that. It's more about the understated grind, the constant pressure, the steady battle to keep moving forward even when the walls are closing in. And that's what makes it feel fresh. It trusts the audience to pick up on the tension without screaming it at them. It breaks away from cliches like the last-minute hero save, the over-the-top villain speeches, or those big music-backed moments where everything magically falls into place. The way it handles suspense is genius. There's no fast-ticking clock or bomb about to explode, but the stakes still feel enormous. The suspense comes from watching people navigate invisible dangers. Will they lose their jobs? Will their reputations be destroyed? Will they be silenced by powerful political forces? It's a psychological suspense rather than a physical one, and the film nails it. The feeling of being constantly watched, judged, and attacked through public opinion becomes the real battlefield. The genre usually tells us to look for visible enemies. Here, the enemies are often just names on paper, rumors in the air, headlines on a morning broadcast. The tension simmers quietly, but it's always there. The film also flirts with documentary style, using real news footage and blending it seamlessly with the fictional recreations. This could have easily felt gimmicky or jarring, but it's done so smoothly that it actually strengthens the genre execution. It reminds the audience that this isn't just a movie story. This is history, and it's being told with a journalistic precision that fits perfectly into the world it's depicting. The genre doesn't bend toward melodrama or fantasy. It keeps both feet firmly planted in reality, which makes every decision feel heavier, every word more loaded. In terms of balancing drama and humor, the film shows remarkable restraint. The humor is not flashy or forced. It sneaks in through the sharp wit of the characters, through quiet asides and knowing glances, through the dry sarcasm that often bubbles up in stressful workplaces like newsrooms. It's a grounded humor, the kind that makes the characters feel real rather than scripted. It doesn't undercut the serious tone. It actually highlights the humanity of the people involved. They aren't symbols or archetypes. They're professionals, friends, people who laugh through their fear because that's sometimes the only way to keep going. The film does follow certain genre staples. You've got the brave journalists, the looming political threat, the struggle against censorship, but it also carefully sidesteps the usual pitfalls. There's no cartoonish villain here. Senator McCarthy is mostly presented through real footage, which strips away the chance to dramatize him as some exaggerated movie monster. Instead, he feels more unsettling because he's just as he was, raw, real, and part of the system. This choice forces the film to lean into realism rather than creating a hyperdramatic big bad. And that choice fits perfectly with the film's overall mood. It's not about easy heroes and easy villains. It's about a complicated system where telling the truth can cost you everything. The film's pacing is another clever genre move. Where other political dramas might drag in the middle, or build toward a giant confrontation, Good Night and Good Luck keeps the pacing tight and focused. It never strays into unnecessary subplots or distractions. It knows exactly the story it wants to tell and sticks to it with laser precision. The tension builds in a steady, quiet rhythm instead of dramatic spikes, which matches the story's realistic approach. Even the visual style, shot entirely in black and white, gives the film a sense of classic genre throwback, while also making it feel crisp and modern. It nods to the era it's portraying without feeling like a lifeless museum piece. It feels alive, immediate, and urgent. When you look at it all together, Good Night and Good Luck is a masterclass in genre execution. Not because it blindly follows the rules, but because it knows exactly when to bend them, when to ignore them, and when to sharpen them into something that feels fresh, intense, and deeply human. It doesn't need to dress itself up with genre tricks. It's confident enough to let the real story, the real risks, and the real people do all the heavy lifting. And that's what makes it stand out. Good Night and Good Luck doesn't just tell a story about the past. It throws a mirror right in the face of the present. The social and cultural commentary baked into this film is sharp, relentless, and carefully threaded through every conversation, every choice, every frame. It's not just a movie about Edward R. Murrow or about Senator Joseph McCarthy. It's a movie about fear. It's a movie about power. It's a movie about what happens when people stop asking questions because they're too scared to know the answers. And the most brilliant part? The film never beats the audience over the head with a loud political message. It simply lays out the story, with its raw stakes and careful tension, and lets the implications echo into whatever modern world the viewer is living in. It's not about telling you what to think. It's about making sure you start thinking. The backdrop of McCarthyism isn't just historical decoration. It's the pressure cooker that reveals the uncomfortable truths about media, politics, and personal responsibility. The film doesn't hide behind nostalgia or pretend this was just a problem of the past. By showing how fear was weaponized in the 1950s, it slyly asks us whether we're still making the same mistakes today. Are we still letting fear dictate what we say and what we don't? Are we still letting the loudest voices drown out the quiet truth? The parallels are there, hanging in the air, never forced but impossible to miss. The way the film tackles the role of journalism is razor-focused social commentary. It strips away the romantic image of the fearless reporter and gives us something more complicated, more human. Murrow and his team aren't painted as superheroes. They're professionals under enormous pressure, knowing that standing up might cost them their careers, their reputations, maybe even their safety. The film doesn't pretend that the decision to fight back against McCarthy was easy. It shows how corporate interests, public opinion, and political power can all align to silence dissent. It's a direct commentary on how the media can be both a shield and a weapon, and how those holding the microphone decide which one it will be. But the film's commentary isn't just about media. It's about society's willingness to turn on itself. It's about how people can be pushed to betray friends, to accept lies, to stay quiet simply because they're afraid of being the next target. The story digs into the way fear spreads, not like a fire but like a fog, seeping into boardrooms, newsrooms, and living rooms until nobody can see clearly anymore. The film asks hard questions about personal courage and moral responsibility. It shows us that sometimes the scariest thing isn't being attacked. It's realizing you might have to stand alone. The commentary also stretches into corporate influence and the subtle ways power controls the narrative. CBS executives aren't cartoon villains trying to silence Murrow. They're men trying to protect the company's bottom line. The film shows how businesses, even well-meaning ones, can become complicit in silencing uncomfortable truths when profits are on the line. Sponsors pull out. Advertisers get nervous. The threat isn't always government censorship. Sometimes it's a canceled paycheck, a loss of funding, a quiet suggestion that maybe this story should wait. The film threads this into the story without ever needing to point giant arrows at it. It just lets these quiet pressures speak for themselves. What's really clever is how the film comments on public complacency. The audience watching Murrow's broadcast is never shown. There's no cutaway to cheering crowds or angry mobs. The film leaves that space intentionally empty, as if to say, it's not about how people reacted then. It's about how you're reacting now. The viewer is placed directly in the seat of the television audience, forced to reflect on whether they would stand by Murrow or turn away in fear. It's an invitation to examine whether we, as a society, are still choosing comfort over confrontation. The film's use of McCarthy's real footage is one of its boldest social statements. By not casting an actor, by letting McCarthy literally speak for himself, the film sends a powerful message. The threat didn't need cinematic exaggeration. It was real. It was public. It was on television for everyone to see. The film is challenging us to reckon with how easily we can accept or ignore dangerous rhetoric when it comes wrapped in the language of patriotism and security. The film also subtly speaks to the erosion of critical thinking. When people accept accusations without evidence, when the fear of being labeled becomes more powerful than the search for truth, society crumbles from within. The film never launches into a preachy monologue about this, but the message hums beneath every decision the characters make. It's a warning that still applies, maybe even more urgently today. And then there's Murrow's monologue about television's role in shaping society. It's not just a commentary on 1950s TV. It's a challenge aimed squarely at modern media. Murrow's words cut deep. They ask whether the platforms we trust to inform us are actually making us smarter, or simply entertaining us into silence. It's a brutally relevant question, and the film lets it hang in the air unanswered, daring the audience to sit with it. The beauty of the film's social commentary is that it never feels like a lecture. It's woven naturally into the story, lived and breathed by the characters, embedded in the smallest gestures and the largest confrontations. The film respects the complexity of its topics. It doesn't flatten them into simple good versus evil stories. It shows that fear, power, and integrity are messy, tangled forces that don't always give us clear paths or easy victories. By the time the story unfolds, you realize that good night and good luck isn't just recounting a historical event. It's starting a conversation about the world we still live in. It doesn't scream its messages at you. It lets them simmer, trusting that the audience will pick up the threads and follow them wherever they lead. And those threads, fear, silence, truth, responsibility, they're just as tangled and urgent now as they were in the smoky newsrooms of the 1950s. Good night and good luck hooks the audience in a way that's incredibly rare. It doesn't rely on emotional manipulation or cheap thrills to get reactions. Instead, it pulls you in with quiet intensity, making you lean forward, not because something is about to explode, but because you're desperate to see who will speak, who will stand up, who will fold under the weight of fear. The emotional engagement is not the kind that punches you in the gut with tragedy or makes you cheer wildly with heroic victories. It's more like a slow tightening of the chest, a steady build of unease, curiosity, admiration, and reflection that sneaks up on you and refuses to let go. The audience isn't being spoon-fed reactions. The film trusts people to find their own emotional entry points, which actually makes it hit harder because the feelings come from within, not from cinematic manipulation. There's something fascinating about how the film sparks curiosity and attention from the very first scene. The smoky rooms, the low murmur of the newsroom, the quick but natural dialogue. It immediately immerses you in this world where every word matters. You can almost feel the audience collectively focusing, like everyone is suddenly alert, tuning into something serious and intimate. It doesn't slap you with big dramatic cues. It quietly demands your attention, and somehow that feels more gripping. It draws people into this mental chess game where every move, every sentence carries weight. You're not watching to see what happens. You're watching to see what people will choose. One of the most powerful ways the film engages is through tension that feels deeply personal. It's not about the fate of the world hanging in the balance. It's about whether Murrow and his team will keep their integrity, whether they'll survive the backlash, whether they can push through the suffocating pressure without breaking. That kind of tension creates a connection that feels almost intimate with the audience. You don't just watch them. You start rooting for them, worrying for them, wondering whether you'd have the same courage in their place. And the emotional engagement isn't just tied to Murrow. The supporting characters pull the audience in too. Take Don Hollenbeck, the CBS newscaster who becomes one of the more tragic figures in the story. His struggles with public scrutiny, professional isolation, and personal pressure unfold quietly, but they hit with devastating impact. The way the film handles his arc is subtle, but it invites a deep, almost aching empathy. There are no grand speeches, no dramatic meltdowns. Just a man slowly worn down by the crushing weight of fear and public attack. It leaves the audience thinking about the invisible toll these battles take on the people who fight them. The film also sparks reflection in a way that lingers long after the credits roll. It doesn't hand out clear answers or tell you how to feel. It leaves questions floating in the air, waiting for the audience to pick them up. How far would you go to protect your principles? When is it worth risking everything for the truth? How often do we, even now, stay silent to protect ourselves? These aren't questions that fade as soon as you leave the theater. They stick, they itch at the back of your mind. They show up in conversations days later. The film invites discussion not because it's controversial in a loud, headline-grabbing way, but because it's quietly provocative, making people examine their own lives and choices. In terms of rewatchability, this is the kind of film that keeps giving on repeat viewings. The first time, you're wrapped up in the story, the tension, the choices. But when you revisit it, you start noticing the small details, the glances exchanged between characters, the layered meanings in Murrow's calm but loaded words, the quiet moments where the real battles are fought not with microphones, but with quick decisions and silent fears. Every scene feels precise, every piece of dialogue feels like it has a weight beneath the surface, and that depth keeps pulling people back to discover more. The film doesn't aim for shock value, but there are moments that land with surprising emotional force. Watching McCarthy's real footage still jolts the audience. It's raw, it's uncomfortable, and it breaks the usual rhythm of a fiction film in a way that makes you sit up straighter. You realize you're not watching a dramatization of history. You're watching history itself, and it's terrifying in its ordinariness. The shock isn't in the content. It's in the realization of how close this all was to everyday life. Humor is another smart way the film keeps the audience engaged. It's not laugh-out-loud funny, but the dry, razor-sharp wit sprinkled through the newsroom exchanges adds levity without breaking the tension. It's the kind of humor that feels real. The kind people use to push through stress, to keep going when things are crumbling around them. These moments make the characters feel alive, and make the world feel breathable, even when the pressure is mounting. What really makes the film resonate is how much it respects the audience. It doesn't rely on dramatic music to tell you how to feel, doesn't over-explain the stakes, and doesn't hold your hand through the ethical complexities. It trusts that the audience will feel the weight of it, will connect the dots, will understand the silences as much as the words. That level of trust actually pulls viewers in closer because they feel like participants, not just spectators. And in the end, the strongest form of engagement this film creates is the kind that leaves people thinking, talking, and maybe even questioning their own role in how stories are told and truths are protected. It's the kind of film that keeps whispering in your ear long after it's over. And that whisper is exactly what keeps the audience coming back. Good Night and Good Luck stands out sharply when stacked against other journalism-focused films, political dramas, or even within George Clooney's own directorial catalog. It doesn't follow the path most newsroom films tend to take. If you compare it to something like All the President's Men, which is perhaps the gold standard for journalism cinema, the difference in energy is immediately noticeable. All the President's Men is driven by the thrill of the chase, the adrenaline of uncovering the Watergate scandal, with scenes that pulse with whispered phone calls, secret meetings, and a constant sense of urgency. Good Night and Good Luck takes a quieter, more claustrophobic route. It's not about the chase. It's about the confrontation. It's about standing still, locking eyes with a powerful enemy, and daring to speak the truth into the silence. Where other films rely on movement and suspense, this one is built on stillness, on measured dialogue, on tension that simmers rather than explodes. When placed alongside Spotlight, another brilliant piece of investigative journalism cinema, the contrast is equally compelling. Spotlight is about the grind, the long, unglamorous process of digging through files and surviving bureaucratic walls. It's focused on persistence. Good Night and Good Luck is focused on risk. Murrow and his team aren't slowly building a case in the background. They're broadcasting their accusations live, knowing the backlash will be immediate and brutal. The stakes are sharper, more personal. There's no safety net, no time to quietly confirm every lead. They push forward in full view of the nation, which creates a unique flavor of tension that feels riskier, bolder, and more immediate than the methodical pace of Spotlight. If you look at The Post, with its high-profile ensemble cast and Spielberg's sweeping direction, you get a story that leans into the grandeur of defying authority, the eventual triumph over oppressive systems. Good Night, and Good Luck deliberately strips that away. It offers no grand victory. It offers no sweeping orchestral moments to signal the win. It's grittier in its realism. It knows that standing up doesn't always change the world overnight. It focuses on the quiet, often uncelebrated act of doing the right thing, even when it feels like shouting into a void. Where The Post soars with triumphant energy, Good Night, and Good Luck sits in the uncomfortable aftermath, showing that the cost of integrity can be steep, and that sometimes the best outcome is simply surviving the fight with your principles intact. Within Clooney's own directorial work, Good Night, and Good Luck is particularly distinct. If you compare it to his later film The Ides of March, which also tackles political games and media spin, the difference is almost philosophical. The Ides of March leans into cynicism, showing how easily people can be corrupted, how ideals get chewed up and spit out in the machinery of political ambition. Good Night, and Good Luck is more earnest. It isn't about the fall from grace. It's about the near impossibility of holding on to grace when the world is trying to shake it loose from your grip. It's about the fight to maintain integrity rather than watching it erode. Clooney's directorial style in this film is more restrained, more patient, and that restraint becomes its own form of storytelling. When comparing it to other black and white modern films like The Artist or Frances Ha, it doesn't use the black and white aesthetic as a playful throwback or as an artistic quirk. It uses it as a tool for immersion. The choice feels like a way to lock the viewer into that specific era, to remove modern visual distractions and put the focus entirely on the weight of the words, the smoke curling in the air, the nervous glances exchanged in the newsroom. It's not stylized for the sake of style. It's functional. It's immersive. It's the skin of the story. Even when compared to classic courtroom dramas like 12 Angry Men, you can see how Good Night, and Good Luck shares that same claustrophobic energy and character-driven momentum, but it steers clear of the overt emotional swings and the clear hero versus villain structure that courtroom films often rely on. Murrow's battle isn't waged in a court. It's waged in front of a camera, against public perception, corporate pressure, and the fear pulsing through American society. There's something thrilling about how the film never grants the audience the comfort of a decisive victory. It stays grounded in reality, where wins are messy, incomplete, and sometimes quietly tragic. In terms of George Clooney's overall body of work, this film feels like a sharp departure from his more mainstream, charismatic, and commercially polished performances. It's lean, focused, and stripped of excess. Unlike his more entertaining, playful films like Ocean's 11 or Leatherheads, Good Night, and Good Luck is all about precision, restraint, and intellectual engagement. It's not about dazzling the audience. It's about confronting them. The film also stands apart from other political thrillers because it refuses to rely on sensationalism. It doesn't craft over-the-top villains. It doesn't artificially inflate the stakes, and it doesn't make the danger look cinematic. It lets the real words of McCarthy carry their own terrifying weight. In this way, it distances itself from the conventions of the genre and feels more like a historical dialogue than a crafted thriller. When measured against its peers, Good Night, and Good Luck carves out its own space. It doesn't try to replicate the formula of suspense-driven journalism films, and it doesn't settle into the comfortable patterns of political dramas that love a cathartic payoff. Instead, it stands alone as a film that trusts subtlety, thrives on restraint, and offers a storytelling experience that is as intellectually stimulating as it is emotionally resonant. It's a film that finds power in its silences, in its patience, and in its refusal to play by the familiar cinematic rules of the genre. Good Night, and Good Luck is soaked in symbolism and subtle metaphors that quietly weave through the film without waving their hands for attention. They're there, lurking beneath the surface, adding extra layers of meaning that deepen the story and sharpen the commentary. One of the most striking symbols is the omnipresent haze of cigarette smoke that curls through nearly every frame. It's not just a period detail. It serves as this lingering visual metaphor for the murkiness of truth, the atmosphere of paranoia, and the suffocating tension that hangs over every conversation. The smoke constantly obscures the air, just like fear and propaganda cloud clear judgment and honest discourse. It becomes this ghostly presence, always in the background, a visual reminder that in this era, clarity is hard to find, and everyone is moving through a fog of uncertainty. The relentless use of black and white is another powerful symbolic choice. It's not just about evoking the 1950s newsreel aesthetic. It visually reinforces the central theme of moral absolutes versus societal gray areas. McCarthy saw the world in black and white. You were either loyal or a traitor, with no middle ground. Murrow's battle is to push against this rigid thinking, to reclaim the space where nuance and fairness live. The entire film is framed in literal black and white, but it challenges that simplicity, showing that the world isn't that easily divided. The visual style ironically underscores the very thing the film is fighting against: oversimplification. The black and white also gives the film a sense of urgency and immediacy, stripping away modern gloss and forcing the viewer to sit inside this morally charged arena, where everything feels stark and unavoidable. The ever-present television screens, and the way the camera frequently frames characters through glass windows, screens, or reflections is another layer of metaphorical brilliance. It speaks to the performative nature of the media, the barrier between the broadcaster and the public, and the distortion of reality through the lens of television. The screen becomes both a weapon and a shield. Murrow uses it to challenge McCarthy, but it's also a tool McCarthy manipulates to spread fear. This double-edged symbol sits at the heart of the story, forcing the audience to think about the power and danger of mass communication, especially when that screen filters what we see and how we see it. The opening and closing speeches by Murrow, particularly his famous "television will be nothing but wires and lights in a box" remark, is not just a commentary on entertainment. It's a sweeping metaphor about responsibility and the soul of public discourse. Television, in this framing, becomes a stand-in for any platform that can either enlighten or distract. It's a choice. The screen can either be a battlefield for truth or a circus of meaningless noise. This recurring idea about the potential emptiness of the medium hovers over every newsroom scene, adding a quiet layer of tension about what the role of journalism really is. Don Hollenbeck's character is also layered with symbolic meaning. He's not just a colleague. He represents the personal toll of public scrutiny and the way fear erodes not just careers, but psyches. His arc is a mirror to the larger national panic. His inner collapse symbolizes what happens when the individual is crushed by the weight of mass accusation and public hysteria. His struggle isn't just a subplot. It's a human metaphor for the fragility of those caught in the machine. Even the sound design carries symbolic weight. The persistent background hum of the newsroom, the clicking typewriters, the ticking clocks, all of it forms a kind of low-level pressure cooker. The clocks especially are significant. Time is always ticking. Deadlines are always looming, and the weight of history is always pressing in. The rhythm of the newsroom is a subtle metaphor for the unstoppable pace of public judgment, and the limited window to act before silence becomes complicity. There's also a recurring motif of isolation. Murrow, often framed alone under harsh lighting, frequently appears distanced from his colleagues, either physically or in the way the camera separates him with barriers like glass or shadows. This visual separation symbolizes the loneliness of moral leadership, the isolation that comes with taking a stand when most people stay seated. Even in group settings, Murrow often seems set apart, a deliberate framing that underscores the price of courage. The jazz soundtrack by Diane Reeves adds another symbolic texture to the film. Jazz, with its improvisation and loose structure, is the perfect backdrop to a story about challenging rigid systems and fighting for creative and intellectual freedom. The smooth, slightly melancholic tones of the jazz numbers offer a contrast to the sharp, rigid structure of the televised broadcasts, almost as if the music is whispering about a freer, more honest way of expression that exists beyond the confines of tightly scripted news and government statements. One of the most poignant metaphors is the role of silence throughout the film. Silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's weaponized, it's heavy, and it speaks volumes. Long pauses in conversations, the quiet wait after broadcasts, the moments where characters are left alone with their thoughts. All of these silences are deliberate. They symbolize the fear of speaking out, the cost of being outspoken, and the vacuum that can swallow truth when people decide to say nothing. Silence in this film is not neutral. It's a character in itself, pressing in on the others, daring them to either break it or be consumed by it. Good night, and good luck layers its symbolism so seamlessly into the visual and narrative fabric of the story that it never feels like it's trying to deliver a lecture. Instead, it feels like the film is quietly planting signals, leaving trails that pull the audience deeper into its world, urging them to look a little closer, think a little harder, and recognize that what they see on the surface is only part of the story. The metaphors aren't decorations, they're the pulse of the film, and they make every scene resonate with meanings that echo long after the screen fades to black. Good night, and good luck isn't part of a franchise or cinematic universe. It stands entirely on its own, but it is deeply entrenched in historical context, and that's where its weight and purpose really take shape. The film drops us right into the height of the Red Scare in 1950s America, during the reign of Senator Joseph McCarthy and his aggressive, fear-driven hunt for alleged communists infiltrating the government, the military, and even Hollywood. This period wasn't just a backdrop. It was a nationwide fever of suspicion where accusations alone could ruin reputations, careers, and lives. The film's brilliance lies in how meticulously it captures this tension without needing to exaggerate or bend the facts to fit a dramatic arc. It's almost chilling how faithfully it sticks to real events. George Clooney and his team didn't rewrite history, they leaned into it. They even went as far as using actual archival footage of McCarthy himself rather than casting an actor to play him, which is a bold choice that roots the story firmly in documented reality and leaves no room for dramatized interpretation of his persona. The film captures not only the events but also the cultural texture of the era with incredible precision. The newsroom setups, the chain smoking, the scratchy microphones, the fashion, the rhythm of speech, and even the clunky, hands-on nature of television broadcasting. All of it immerses the viewer in the time period without making it feel like a museum exhibit. It feels lived in, urgent, and palpably tense. You can practically feel the static crackle of the old black and white TVs, and the weight of every word spoken into those boxy microphones, where a slip or an accusation could instantly light a fire in the press or in Washington. The film doesn't just recreate the physical world of the 1950s. It channels the psychological state of the nation, a country perched on the edge of paranoia, where silence could be seen as guilt and public dissent could swiftly turn you into an enemy. What's especially compelling is how the film situates itself within the actual media landscape of the time. It shows how much power was concentrated in the hands of broadcasters like Edward R. Murrow, but also how precarious that power was. Sponsors could pull funding in an instant. Corporate executives could push back against controversial reporting, and the looming threat of government retaliation made every broadcast a potential battleground. The historical accuracy here isn't just in the settings or costumes. It's in the atmosphere of dread, the quiet pressures behind closed doors, and the invisible hands shaping what could and could not be said on television. The film lays bare the fragile relationship between media independence and corporate interest, a theme that is historically accurate but also feels eerily relevant in any era. The depiction of McCarthy's tactics is historically precise too. The film doesn't invent scenes or fictionalize courtroom drama to raise the stakes. It lets McCarthy's real words and footage speak for themselves, which ends up being far more powerful and disturbing than any scripted version could have been. It trusts the audience to feel the gravity of those moments without embellishment. That restraint makes the story hit even harder, because what you're watching is history in its rawest form. It reminds you that this really happened, that these careers, these lives, and this battle for journalistic integrity unfolded just as we're seeing it. Even in the side characters, the film carefully draws from real people and actual newsroom dynamics, not just composites or archetypes. Don Hollenbeck's struggle with public smearing and personal collapse is rooted in historical record, and his story is a sobering counterpoint to Murrow's public resilience. Through characters like Hollenbeck, the film underscores that standing up to power came at a steep personal price, and it shows that the collateral damage wasn't just political, it was deeply personal and painfully human. In the broader context of American political history, Good Night and Good Luck fits like a key in a lock. It isn't a sweeping, comprehensive account of McCarthyism or the Cold War. It's a laser-focused examination of one key player, one newsroom, and one televised confrontation that became a turning point in how the media held political figures accountable. The film doesn't overreach, but it zeroes in on the moment when fear started to lose its grip, thanks to voices like Murrow's. The historical fidelity isn't just in the dates and events. It's in the emotional landscape, the societal pulse, and the unspoken anxieties that ran under the surface of public life. When you stack this film alongside other historical dramas that sometimes play fast and loose with facts for the sake of pacing or emotional payoff, Good Night and Good Luck stands out because of how fiercely it guards the line between dramatization and documentation. It refuses to dilute the historical truth for cinematic comfort. It holds up a mirror to the past without distortion. And in doing so, it makes the stakes of that era feel immediate, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. The result is a film that doesn't just recreate history. It immerses you in it so thoroughly that you feel like you've stepped into the very moment when the balance of power, fear, and truth teetered on the edge of a broadcast signal. Good Night and Good Luck was not a film made with the thunderous budget of a Hollywood blockbuster. In fact, it was crafted with a remarkably modest budget of around $7 million, which in the world of big studio productions is practically pocket change. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite the small budget, the film never once feels limited or cheap. The black and white cinematography was not a cost-cutting choice but an artistic one, and it gave the film a visual texture that perfectly suited its era and themes. Every penny spent feels like it went into creating authenticity, from the vintage television sets to the period-accurate wardrobe to the newsroom's smoky, cluttered environment. The film doesn't rely on grandiose set pieces or flashy special effects. It relies on atmosphere, sharp writing, precise acting, and tightly focused scenes that deliver punch after punch with nothing wasted. What's fascinating is that the low budget actually became part of the film's strength. It forced the production to stay lean and disciplined, focusing on dialogue-driven tension and historical accuracy rather than spectacle. George Clooney didn't need to build massive soundstages or hire legions of extras. He needed the right cast, the right locations, and the right tone, and he delivered all of that while keeping the production costs incredibly efficient. Even the choice to use actual footage of Senator McCarthy wasn't just a narrative decision. It also likely saved the expense of creating elaborate recreations or casting another actor for that role. It's the kind of smart, resourceful filmmaking that proves you don't need hundreds of millions of dollars to create something powerful, resonant, and unforgettable. When it hit theaters, Good Night and Good Luck performed surprisingly well, especially for a black and white, politically charged drama without the usual commercial hooks. It went on to earn over $54 million worldwide, which is a remarkable return on its modest investment. That's not blockbuster territory, but for a film of this size, tone, and subject matter, it was an undeniable success. It captured the attention of critics, industry insiders, and audiences who were hungry for sharp, intelligent cinema that didn't pander or soften its edges. It wasn't the kind of movie that packed multiplexes with crowds looking for popcorn thrills. It was the kind of movie that filled theaters with people who wanted to lean in, listen, and think. The marketing of the film was very much targeted toward audiences interested in history, journalism, and politics. It wasn't sold as an adrenaline rush or a visual spectacle. It was positioned as an important, timely, and cerebral film, and that approach worked beautifully for its intended audience. The buzz from film festivals and awards season also played a huge role in its financial success. It generated word-of-mouth momentum and built its reputation on the strength of its performances, its thematic relevance, and its razor-sharp writing. The awards attention, including multiple Oscar nominations, gave the film a second wave of box office life, pulling in viewers who might not have initially been drawn to it. Interestingly, the film's profitability also stands as a quiet rebuke to the idea that movies need to cater to the widest possible audience to make money. Good Night and Good Luck proved that a tightly focused story, told with care and precision, can punch far above its financial weight and carve out a meaningful place in the cultural conversation. It wasn't designed to dominate the global box office or rake in billions. It was designed to tell the truth, to illuminate a critical moment in history, and to do so with style, intelligence, and emotional weight. The fact that it managed to turn a significant profit along the way just reinforces how well George Clooney and his team balanced the art and the business of filmmaking. This was a movie that bet on substance over flash, and that gamble paid off, both critically and financially. Here's the rewritten section without references or external links. If you're looking to dive into Good Night and Good Luck, here's how you can experience it. The original 2005 film is available to rent or buy on popular platforms like Prime Video, Apple TV, and Microsoft Store. Rental prices typically start at a reasonable rate, and purchasing the film is also an affordable option. For many viewers, it is also available for streaming as part of a subscription service, particularly on Prime Video and Apple TV's library, depending on the region. However, the film is currently not available on Netflix in many areas. The best way to watch the film is to view it in high definition on a good screen with solid speakers or headphones. This will allow you to fully appreciate the sharp dialogue, the smoky jazz soundtrack, and the atmospheric tension that fills every scene. But there's more. In 2025, a Broadway stage adaptation of Good Night and Good Luck made its debut with a special live broadcast. It aired on CNN and was also streamed on digital platforms, offering a rare opportunity to experience a live theatrical performance from home. The event included a post-show discussion with major journalists and offered a unique combination of performance, history, and modern reflection. The broadcast wasn't just a simple recording. It captured the raw energy of live theater, complete with real-time reactions and the electric pace of a Broadway stage. The best way to experience the live Broadway version was to watch it as it aired, creating that thrilling watch party vibe where viewers across the country tuned in together. If you missed it, you can look out for replay options on the same broadcast platforms. Each version of the story has its own distinct flavor. The original film offers a quiet, intense cinematic journey that's perfect for focused, thoughtful viewing. It's best enjoyed in a setting where you can absorb every visual and sonic detail. The Broadway version, on the other hand, pulses with the immediacy of live performance and shared audience energy. It brings out different shades of tension, urgency, and spontaneity. If you're after classic, carefully composed storytelling, the film is your go-to. If you want to feel the thrill of live theater and engage with the story in a real-time setting, the Broadway broadcast version brings that excitement straight into your living room. Both paths lead you deep into the story's powerful exploration of journalism, integrity, and public responsibility. Choose the experience that excites you most.